Hello, and welcome. Welcome to our webinar on unlocking your potential, landing a job in tech, and building a remote career. We are so excited to have you all joining today to learn more from Caleb and Onye about what it really takes to build a remote first tech first career and the journeys that they've both been on. Super excited to have everyone joining. Just a few housekeeping items. You will receive a recording of this right after. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A at the bottom of whatever screen you're using. And yes, if you can keep your questions in the Q&A, then we can keep them all in one place for the end of the session when we'll have the opportunity for a live Q&A. So as a brief introduction, if you signed up for the webinar on unlocking your potential, landing a job in tech and building a roadmap, then you're in the right place. We are joined today by Caleb Maru, who is the founder and writer of Tech Safari, which is, we can say here, the best newsletter on African tech. If you haven't signed up, we will be sharing a link in the follow-up and also in the chat. You can do that. Caleb is a partner with Proxy Ventures and was previously head of programs at entry level, where they were creating programs to break the no experience cycle. We are also joined by our Nexford alumni, Onye Udoi, who is a business analytics analyst with Microsoft and completed his MBA with Nexford. We are really honored to have both of them here today. It's really, truly exciting. I know we're all going to be learning a lot. I'm Jennifer Bonga, Nexford University's Director of Career Innovation, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to Caleb. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks for that great intro, Jennifer. And it's so exciting to be here. As Jennifer introduced me, my name is Caleb Maru. I'm the founder of Tech Safari, and I write about tech across the African continent. And I'm pumped for this. I'm really excited by Nexford University and Onye and his story. This is a really cool event for me because I think it was about 3 months ago, I wrote a story on Nexford University and the work they were doing. And I found that there was this really cool and powerful concept called virtual migration. And Onye is like a great example of that. It's kind of this phenomenon where you can learn from anywhere in the world, you can skill up from anywhere in the world, and you can also get a job from anywhere in the world, from your home country. And I think it's a really cool story of like, well, where the world is going, which is a really distributed world and kind of a global grid, which is an idea that Nexford has. And so I actually wrote an article about this, which I'll share as well. And the sort of idea or the example that I used was Onye and his story of studying and working, studying at Nexford in Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria, and then landing a job at Microsoft in Seattle, where his team is based in Seattle. And so there's so many lessons we can pull from that, and I'm really excited to dive into them today. I'm going to let you introduce yourself in a second, Onye. But before we do that, let's maybe we'll just frame what we're going to dive into in this session and the way that the session will be run. So we're going to kick off with a bit of an overview of Onye and his background and how he got to where he got to, how he landed his job as a business analyst specialist at Microsoft. Then we're going to talk about how do you land a job in tech? What are some of the learnings or the experiences or the lessons that we can take from Onye's story and his trajectory and his journey. Then we're going to talk about some of the benefits of remote work. Onye lives in Lagos, but his team is in Seattle. And so that's a really interesting idea of like, how do you work with a remote team like that and really thrive in a remote role? And then we're going to dive into your questions. So we're going to have you ask questions for Onye, about his experience and how he landed his role, how he's working remotely. So if you have questions, just shoot them in the Q&A as we go. And if the Nexford team can answer them, they will. And if not, then I'll ask them to Onye. So that's how it's going to go. You ready, Onye?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Caleb.
Cool. Firstly, like, let's get a quick intro. I'd love to hear a bit of a rundown on your background on Yale. Like, what were you doing before your role now? And like, tell us a bit about yourself, and what you're doing at the moment.
Okay, thanks a lot, Caleb. So excited to be here to share my story and my journey in tech. Okay, I'm Onyinye Udoy. I'm based in Lagos, like Caleb said, Lagos, Nigeria. That's where I live. I have a background in tech, um, physics and electronics technology, right? But from onset, I had this drive about computers because I actually got introduced to computers through my cousin who was studying computer science at the time. So I recall back in my university days, I got a computer, even though most of the things I do with it was just play games, right? But then I got to know about the hardware and the parts and all, but that was it. Um, Moving on to a couple of years later, after my first degree, that same cousin of mine, he actually had a training with a training institution where he was trained on Microsoft SQL Server management and all. So he had these books, lying around the house, which I picked up on SQL Server and started reading. So what interested me is that I was reading this thing and understanding it, even though I've not had any physical interaction with the application, right? That shows you how simple Microsoft tools are. So I had that. I read through some of those things, theory-wise, I know about it, even though I've not used it. So while searching for a job after my youth service, so youth service is like what every graduate does in Nigeria for 1 year, like provide a service for 1 year after your first degree. Um, so after that, while searching for a job, I ended up getting one in a health management organization. But though it was like a general IT role where we attend to users' issues like there's no network on my system, or my printer is not working, just kind of stuff. And then the app we're actually using then was based on Microsoft Access. That was the first time I had to learn about Access. Even both the front end and the back end was based on Microsoft Access. So it was kind of manual, and I wasn't able to relate with it because I didn't even know about that at the time. But after a couple of years, the organization improved and moved on to deploy a solution that runs on SQL Server backend. And that was where my journey in data analysis kicked off. So I was excited that, wow, I read about this. I now have the opportunity to interact with the application. So moving on from that organization, I joined a credit bureau as a technical support engineer. And then my role there involved helping financial and non-financial institutions with migrating their credit data into a central database. So I had some of the institutions that I was responsible for. So I go in there to set up a local server in their various organizations and also provide training and install biometrics for them. So we also used SQL Server there in the credit bureau. So I got to also deepen my knowledge practical wise on SQL Server. So from there, I've been moving on to the banking sector, to media and entertainment industry, which is a multi-choice. It's a media and entertainment TV, pay for TV organization, that runs the sub-Saharan African region. So I was also there as a senior specialist in insight and analytics. So my business analytics skills just, kept improving over time. And so from there, I got to know about the role in Microsoft, which I applied, even though it took me some time before I found the courage to apply, because I felt, wow, Microsoft is even possible for me to get this role. This is like the best of the best global wise. And how many of us are in Lagos, Nigeria? Because the we are looking for was based in Lagos, Nigeria. I know that we have thousands of business analytics specialists in Lagos, Nigeria. Do I even stand a chance? So actually, the first time I saw the role, I actually skipped it. I felt like it'd be a waste of time, because before then I've applied for several roles within the same Microsoft. I never even got like an invite, but then it popped up again and I went ahead to apply. And today I'm there. So some of the things that I learned in the journey is, I believe, is some of the things I'm going to be sharing with you all today.
Wow, that is such a backstory. I feel like there's a lot there, so I might just ask some questions off the bat from there, 'cause it's a super interesting background. It sounds like you've always been sort of learning and tinkering with tech, right? You've been playing around and sort of adding to your skill set.
Yeah, sure. One thing I love doing is learning new things, right? Um, that's actually how I came across Nexford, right? Because I was trying to learn to, get an MBA, and something actually triggered that. And it's based on my experience in working with the various organizations. I found out there's this just small rift between the tech units and the business units. So when the business units comes to the tech unit that we want this product developed or we want to improve on this or do that, you see the tech units pushing back for various reasons, either because they don't have the manpower or they have other stuff that they need to work on. So there's always this pushback. And I was like, this is one organization. Why do we always have this rift between these two units that need to work together? So I felt like, okay, I have some knowledge and background in tech. It would be nice to also get like a business knowledge and background so I can be able to figure out what's happening and how I can step in when I have the opportunity to step in to mitigate that risk. So that's when I decided to take an MBA. Though my initial plan was to do a master's in my field, but I decided then to take an MBA. And then that year, COVID hit, and we were all required to work remotely. So I felt like this is the right time to do this. Which institution can I get what I'm looking for, that I also have the time to do my day-to-day job and also study for this MBA? So I started my research, and that's how I got to found out about Nexford. So I researched the content, the flexibility, the cost, and everything just aligned. And that's when I applied for the MBA. And I graduated sometime last year, in February of last year. Yeah.
Nice. And what
So
was the
I'm
experience?
always eager to, yeah, sorry. I wanted
Sorry,
to add, I'm
continue.
always eager to learn new stuff, because in the field of tech, if you don't have if you don't have the hunger to learn, you'll be left behind, right? Because the technologies that we're using today are quite different from what we used a couple of years back. Like today, we are talking about AI, right?
Mhm.
So we need to, start learning about AI and how we can use that for our day-to-day job.
Mm. That's awesome. So it sounds like to really stay relevant and to land a job like one at Microsoft, you kind of have to always be learning, right? And like adding to that skill set. Are you always, are you
Yes.
doing more learning now? Like, are you always sort of like trying to add to your resume? Like, how do you think about like lifelong or like continuous learning?
Okay. Even for my current organization, Microsoft, they don't have an option but to learn, because one of our cultures is having a growth mindset, because we believe that everyone can develop and learn, right? So there's something new to learn. There's something that you can use to improve yourself. So we have that mindset, and that helps us to always seek out new knowledge, to always gain new knowledge, to always gain new skills. Because coming into Microsoft, you are not just going to end up on that role that brought you into the organization. There are several other roles within the organization you can transition into. So you might not have the skill when you joined, but you have the opportunity to learn those skills to move into those other roles, right? So you're kind of planning out your entire career within the organization, and you have the opportunity to learn and move and transition into the career that you've planned out.
That's awesome. And I guess just more generally, Anya, like why did you decide to work in tech? It sounds like you kind of fell into it, but what do you like about tech? And do you think would you recommend the broad field of tech to other people who are listening in on this and looking at remote work?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, it sounded like the stars just aligned for me to just delve into it, but it's actually something that I have a passion for, right? And that's why I decided to go get a computer myself. Because I believe tech is like the future. You don't see tech embedded in it, right? So it's very vital. And I would advise everybody, irrespective of the field where you are today, to, still try and find out what skills you can get tech-wise, because there's always something that tech can help you improve in the field where you are today. So today we are talking about AI. So there are some roles that AI can actually like erase, and that's the truth of it, right? There are some roles that AI can actually erase. So we have some things that we are building in our organization. You see co-pilots, it's just like having another pilot flying with you. So you just ask some questions and it helps you provide the solutions. We have ChatGPT today. We see it taking exams and passing. People use it to draft a full letter or stuff like that, right? So these are some people's jobs. So if ChatGPT can do that today, an employer can be like, well, what use do I still have for you? So don't just sit there, right, and say, no, nothing is going to happen. I'm fine with my role. No, always seek out to learn new things. So tech, very important. Everyone needs at least a skill. And the good thing is that there are several roles within tech, right? So you might not start off with software engineering. You can start off with studying about cybersecurity or data analysis, several roles that you can engage in. So you can start at least with any of them to see how you can use it to improve on your current job, right? Before you start thinking about expanding or digging in further.
That's awesome. That's really cool. It sounds like there's a lot of places it can go, and there's so much potential for how tech will change the world, really. But there's a lot of entry points, and there's a lot of ways that people can get started. They don't need to be like a specialist or go do, like years and years of study to get into tech. What I'd really love to know is like, if you were to replay it, if you were to do it again, sort of build your way to getting. Actually, a better question is, for people listening on this call, who are interested in getting a remote role and interested in getting a remote role at a global company, what sort of advice would you give them to get on their way to getting a job like that? How would you recommend they start? And let's assume that they have started at zero. So maybe they haven't done anything in tech before, but they're interested.
Okay, one thing I would say is, first of all, you have to like find out what you're passionate about, right? Then you research what roles exist in tech and see if there's anyone that matches your passion, because passion is one of the things that you really need when it comes to tech, because along the line, you will face some challenges that if you're not passionate about that, you can just abandon it, right? So I'll first say, discover your passion, find a role that aligns with that passion, right? And you have to be strategic about this, right? So after that, identify the skills, strengths, and area of expertise within the tech field. Like we discussed earlier, it could be software development, data analysis, cybersecurity that aligns with what you want to do. Then when you find out, even if you don't have the skills, you can start the learning process. There are tons of materials online that you can enroll and start studying some of the things. Like for me, I took a course on Coursera. I also enrolled in some courses on Udemy, and there are some on YouTube, and even on our Microsoft Learning platform, there are some free courses that you can enroll to acquire the skills. Then after acquiring the skills, you need to maintain a portfolio. So it's nice and cool that you have these skills, but employers want to know what you have done before, right? So having the skills is not enough. You need to show that you can do something with the skills that you've acquired. So even if you don't have the opportunity to work in an organization where you can actually use these skills, you can create maybe personal projects or contribute to open source projects, or even maybe freelance projects. Like for me, I recall back in the days, I enrolled as a United Nations online volunteer. So what happens is when they have projects that are aligned with the skills you've identified that you have, they publish that. So if you go through, see anyone you're interested in, you can sign up, then they will contact you and give you details so you can start working on it. So I remember building a dashboard for them, which they eventually invited me to come and present to a broader team, though because of situations around that time, I couldn't meet up with the presentation. So some of those things are the things that you can do and show as a portfolio that this is what I can do with the skills that I have. Then something else you need to do is to tailor your profile, whether it's your online profile, maybe LinkedIn, or your CV, your physical CV, tailor it to reflect the skills and the interests that you have, and also that portfolio. Because recruiters are looking at your profile, especially your online profile, right? I've had a couple of recruiters reach out to me, even when I've not applied for role, asking me if I'm interested or if I can recommend someone. And that's because I'm sure they've gone through my profile to see what I've done and where I've been and the things that I've achieved in my career, right? So your online profile is very important. Then you also need to use job platforms like LinkedIn to search some of these roles, right? You can use keywords that matches the role you're interested in. For a business analyst, you can go and search business analyst roles or business analyst opportunities, and the system will just churn out all the open roles at the time. You also need to attend conferences, webinars, just like what we're having today, where knowledge is being shared, where you can gain more knowledge, or physical events where you can meet people one-on-one and connect with these people. And that's very important, networking, because I recall in some of the roles in the organizations where I worked in, about 70% of them, I didn't need to apply. It was someone that recommended me for the role. Then the organization reached out to me to have an interview. So I never applied, I never saw the application. So that's where networking is very important. When you network, people get to know you, know the things that you can do, and then they can recommend you when such opportunities, come up. So, and even when you apply, for example, if it's a role that you saw online, make sure that your application matches with what the requirements of the roles are. Try to use the keywords, right, in the role that they've published, because some organizations use systems to scan these things and they use these keywords to find matches. But be honest, don't overbloat your skills or your abilities. Be honest, just use keywords, right? So don't use one CV for every role that you're applying. Always, modify your CV to kind of match like the requirements or the keywords. Then something else that is very important, and which is also what I do, I don't go through all the requirements and need to have 100% match with what the recruiter is looking for. So they might have listed like 10 skills that they're looking for. Once I have 8 of those 10, I go ahead to apply. And most times I notice that even when I start the role, those extra ones are not really needed. They are just nice to have. So don't allow that to deter you, right? So after applying them, prepare for interviews. Very important. You need to prepare. Applying is one thing, getting shortlisted, very great. But if you don't prepare for interview, you might just end up missing that opportunity. So for Microsoft, for me, when I was preparing, I really took time to prepare. I did a lot of research about the organization, their vision, their mission, their culture. And I also came across what is called a STAR strategy of answering behavioral questions. So STAR actually means specific situation, the task, the action, and the results. It's very important to answer all questions, mostly behavioral questions, using this strategy, because it will help you to communicate effectively. It will also help you not to miss out any important points. It also help the interviewer to know that you know what you're talking about, right? Because I remember I think it was my last interview at Microsoft, and one of the questions I was asked after describing using the STAR, the interviewer was really impressed. They asked me to repeat it again because they wanted to take notes, right? So that's very important. You can research more on it. There are tons of materials on that STAR strategy of answering behavioral questions. Then after that, you need to follow up. If you have the opportunity to have the emails of the recruiter, if you don't hear from them after the interview, give them some time, then follow up them. But most times, I believe organizations reach out to the candidate to let them know what the status is. So these are like some of the tips that helped me to land my role in Microsoft.
Okay. Anya, that was amazing. There was a lot in there. So I think we should do a bit of a recap on all those steps, because I think they were good. I'm going to try recap it. If I miss anything, tell me. But I think it starts with the discovery phase. So what do what sort of role in tech speaks to me, and what am I interested in and passionate about? And what sort of role fits that? To doing some research and some thinking and reflection on where you fit into tech. Then the next stage is how do you learn those skills? How do you get those skills? And it seems like there's a lot of like ways you can do that online. Free courses, free materials. Seems like Nexford was also a way that you did that too, to get that like in-depth experience in MBA. So there's the learning, how do you get the skills? And then you can't stop with just just the skills, you need to actually apply them. So how do you put them to work? How do you show that you're doing this? How do you build a portfolio or contribute to projects or volunteer? And it seems like there's a lot of ways to do that. What was next? So you practice and then build your profile. Was that the next one?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
after creating a portfolio, then you need to like showcase, right, these portfolios and your skills, and that's where tailoring your profile comes into play. Like if you don't have a LinkedIn account, you should create a LinkedIn account and then put all the skills with maybe links or stuff to the work that you have done in the past, so that when recruiters see this, they know, okay, because sometimes maybe the thing they are looking out for is something that you have done in the past.
Yeah.
And that helps, hasten the entire process of your recruitment. So that's very important.
So building up your profile next to your portfolio so people can get a full look of who you are. And I'm guessing that's like your CV, your LinkedIn as well. So your public profiles. Awesome. Cool. And then after that, it's like, okay, so you have the profile, you have the skills. Now, how do you go and actually start applying for jobs? And there are a lot of steps to that. There was the, really like getting a bunch of finding these open roles online, on LinkedIn, etc. Applying for many of them, not wanting to be like perfect before you apply. You don't need to have all the requirements, but just applying with the skills you have, as long as it's a fit. And then really preparing for these interviews. And like having the best interview that you can. Was that about everything? Did that capture everything?
Networking as well.
Yeah.
Networking, attending conferences, webinars, and reaching out to people in similar role or similar field, to kind of network and get to know them. Because these ones can help you even find the role you are looking for.
That's awesome. So good. That was great. I think that was really valuable. So thanks for going into that. I have one question before we go into the remote work tips. And that's along that journey, like how is Nexford helpful along those different stages of that journey? There's obviously the learning, but is there support there when it comes to things like the networking or finding a role?
Okay, yeah. So for Nexford, aside like the knowledge that we gained, the school is actually doing a whole lot, right? Role-wise, because I know we have platforms, because we receive regular emails about jobs, preparing for jobs, and also how to create your profiles and your resumes, right? I also know about some of the job fairs where they invite all the alumni to attend. They invite various organizations or companies to come and speak to these alumni and to network and all. Then I also know that Nexford goes on to like on LinkedIn, I know they have a contact of alumni where they provide roles and openings in their various locations that they can apply to. So it's really valuable. You don't just, they don't leave you just after try to, make you help sure that you land a role. And one of the things that actually helped me in this my role in Microsoft is one of the courses that I took in Nexford, which is Culture in a Global Business Environment. I still remember vividly some of the content of that course where it speaks to various cultures, because you can be in a location for a long time that you don't realize that there are other cultures out there, and the way they do business is different from the way you do business. So landing in Microsoft, I get to work with people from various cultures, various regions of the world. My org is situated in Seattle, but we have people from Prague, we have people from India, we have people from various, places that I had to work and interact with. You can imagine the culture shock I would have had if, I wasn't exposed to this initially during my program. So it was very vital for me. Yeah.
That's awesome. Super cool. Thanks for that, Anya. That's such a good insight into like you know, the role you have, your background, how you got the role, and you really broke it down for everyone listening. So I think that's really cool. So thanks for that. Let's talk about remote work, because you're in this unique position, right? You're in Lagos, Nigeria, and your team is mostly in Seattle. You know, what is remote work like that like? And what are some of the challenges? What are some of the difficulties working remotely like this?
Okay. Like I said, remote work, it wasn't what like I planned out for, right? When I started, it was something that just happened, during the COVID period, where everybody was mandated to like work remotely. But it's been very interesting, really. And one of the things that I enjoy most about it is the reduced commute, right? Because even before then, I remember I have to leave my house like 5, 6 a.m. so that I can be able to get to the office by 8, avoid all the traffic and all. It was kind of stressful. Coming back from work, the same thing. So that reduced commute is one of the pros of this remote work. The next one is the cost savings that is associated to it, right? Like the cost of trying to get yourself to work, the cost of getting work clothes from time to time, and all that is totally eradicated. But then another interesting thing is increased productivity. So all those time that we waste in transit, you can actually like put it into the work and do something impactful, right? Because I know back then in my former role, when we gauged before and after remote, we saw that productivity actually went way high up. So that means this remote work increases productivity. And of course, better work-life balance. People have been talking about work-life balance, but I really don't know how it can be achieved without without working remotely, right? Because you have extra time for yourself, for your hobbies, for your family. So you can be able to balance work and your personal life. So those are the pros, even though it comes with some disadvantages, right? And then one of the ones, or let me not say disadvantage or challenges, right? That's what you ask, Caleb. So one of them is the time zone differences, right? Because now I'm working with people from different time zones, and we are supposed to collaborate. We are supposed to take decisions together. But sometimes it's difficult to find a time that works with everyone, right? So like in Microsoft, what we did was just to try and find a common time. Of course, people have to make sacrifices, yeah? So just a common time for our sessions or our meetings or our stand-ups, and everybody just maintains that time. But that also requires self-discipline, right? You have to be self-disciplined, right? Because if not, it might end up costing your team a whole lot, or even yourself. Because I remember a friend of mine shared with me about a colleague of his who was supposed to like be in a meeting. He didn't join the meeting, and then he was called on the phone. When he now picked up, they realized that he was in the market, right? This is someone that's supposed to be working. He's using the work hours to go shop. And it's like that became
Nice.
common among the team, that the organization asked all of them to return back to the office. You understand? So you have to be self-disciplined. So those are the cons. And of course, sometimes there could be lack of work boundaries. Sometimes you can be working because you are at home, you can be working and you don't realize this is the time to end the work for the day. So you now work into the night because you are trying to just finish up something that you know that if you were working in the office, you would have ended that day at 5 p.m. and start heading home. But because you feel you're at home, you will just keep going on and on and on. So that work boundaries is another challenge of it. And of course, these distractions, especially those that maybe have kids or pets, those can be distracting, right? When you're trying to work. So you have to find a way to mitigate that. And one of the major ones also is technological issues, right? And one of the things in Africa, one of them, the primary one is internet connectivity. So sometimes you could have something to do, and then that's the day all your hardware will decide to start freezing, or your connectivity is getting interrupted every second. So those are some of the cons, right? Yeah, so that has been some of the things that I see in remote work. Yeah.
Let's recap that, because I think there was some really cool pros and there was some really not great cons as well with remote work. And we're going to talk about how you can work through some of the cons. But the good things sounds like, you know, you reduced your commute time. Sounds like you spent hours just moving from place to place when it was in person.
Yes, yes, especially where I live in Lagos, there's tons
Lagos
of
traffic,
traffic.
the
Yes,
worst.
so is either you leave very early or you leave late to avoid that.
Cool. Okay. And then okay, so that's a pro. And then same with, I guess, you have more time and so you can become more productive too. Because you're not spending as much time working as traveling.
Yeah.
What were some of the other pros? Were there others that you mentioned?
Yes, I mentioned cost savings, right? Of
Yeah.
course, you can save costs, all the commute costs, whether you're buying petrol or you're paying for transport and all that. And then, of course, your work clothes. So some people, they are very keen on what they put on and they like change clothing every month and work
Yeah.
clothes, right? But for remote, so you don't need to, worry yourself about that. You can just get your t-shirts and you are cool. And of course, better work-life balance. So you have more time, for the personal stuff you want to do. If it's a hobby or have time with friends and family, right? So you can balance your work and time. So you already know that this is the time cut out for my work. And once it's over, you are switching to your personal life, right? But then
Mm,
if it wasn't we are heading to the office every day, those extra time, you have to give the organization their own time. So they won't say because there's traffic, you should go early. You have to give them their full time. So those time that you spend in traffic is your personal time that is wasting away, right? But now
mm.
you gain it back because you're not working remotely. Yeah.
That's awesome. Some of the tough parts where that you mentioned is like the discipline. So like actually staying self-disciplined and working when you're at home, it's hard. Like my bed is right here. And so it's like sometimes I'm like, should I lie down and work? You know, like I totally feel that on the discipline side. Also like time zones and communication as well, right? Like having with you when you have a global team, finding a time that aligns for both of you can be really tough, and sometimes
Yeah.
means you're up late or you know, you're like waking up very early. um yeah, and then what was the other one? Was it distractions, or was it oh, like it's hard to grow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
distractions, yes, yes. So you could be in a serious session and then maybe your toddler just wants your attention, right? Or
Mm.
I've been in a session where someone was presenting and his cat just jumped on his system, or the dog just started barking.
Yeah.
Then you start hearing a lot of, give me 1 second, excuse me, give me 1 second, all those
Yeah. Yeah.
distractions. So that's one of the cons. And of course, the technology issues that I mentioned. Yeah.
Awesome. So what are some of the like the best practices or things that you do that really help you get into remote work? Like how do you do remote work well? And what are some of the tips and tricks that you use?
Okay. For me, when it comes to remote work, it's a combination of various things, right? The technical skills, the communication skills, the self-discipline that I discussed earlier, and having a proactive approach to work. So you need to really psych yourself to say, even though you are working from your personal space, maybe home or wherever, this is still work. So assume that you are in the office, right? And one of the things I do was to set up like a workspace. And that's where I'm having this session right now, like a productive workspace with necessary work tools. So I have my hardware, my headsets, and everything set up, right? And everybody knows that this is my workspace, right? Then I also try to establish and maintain a primary routine, right? Like I know that this time I'm supposed to start my work and this is the time I'm supposed to end it. I use the word primary routine because it can change. Like I said, when we are trying to find time for our sessions, people have to make sacrifices. So maybe the slots that we could find is way after you're supposed to have like ended work for the day, right? But you find yourself um, still working because of that's the best time that works for everyone, right? So have that primary routine to know on a normal day, I start work at this time, I take break at this time, and I end my work at this time. Then I also ensure that I have regular communication. So we have tools that we use to communicate, right? It's not, it doesn't always have to be like a session where everybody logs on and we have a meeting. so we can communicate async. So if you have any updates, just drop it in those tools like Teams, which is what we use, where you can collaborate with your other team, and also try to document as much as possible the work that you are doing. Remember, with remote work, nobody's seeing you physically, so people can assume that you are sleeping somewhere, you're not doing anything. So what's the proof that you have you're actually working if you don't document and like provide updates and collaborate with others? Then also find time to learn. Like I try to learn new trends. Currently, I'm a business analyst, but I'm trying to delve deeper into data science, and that's what I've planned to do this period. And there's also AI that I've already, taken out some of the things I want to learn about it, because these are things that I can bring or blend with my current role and even some of the work that I'm doing, right? So find time to learn new skills, new trend, innovations. It's something that we also prioritize, like I mentioned earlier in my organization. And that's why we said, so in our org, we decided that Friday is a no meeting day. So irrespective of what's happening, there are no meetings. People should use the time that they find to go learn something, right? Then also the one that I feel is very important is having a regular check-in with your manager. So for me, my manager is my body, right? If nobody else knows that I exist, she's the only one that knows that I exist. She knows all the projects I'm involved in, all the tasks that I'm doing, the stakeholders, that are involved in those same projects, because I discuss my career plans with her and she knows what I need to do to achieve the milestones, right? And during these check-ins, she helps me provide guidance, whether I'm on the right track, where I need to improve, or the things that I'm doing well. And she has this information because she also syncs with my stakeholders to get feedback on the work that I'm doing, right? So she gives me all this feedback. So that's why I say your manager should be your best buddy, right? So they can help you and guide you through your career path or your career journey in the org. So these are some of the things that I do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's recap that, because there's so many good insights here that I really want us to like capture them so people can recap. So it sounds like having a really strong relationship with your manager, catching up with them consistently, and just like really asking them like, where can you improve, and having them have alignment on what you're doing is important. The other one was, having just really documenting your work, right? Showing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Making sure people know what's happening. I feel like that's a big one. I always we have a remote team as well at Tech Safari, and it's always like first thing in the morning, like what was your day yesterday? What are you working on today? What's blocking you? So having that consistent communication, I also find really works well in my team as well. What else? I think you said a lot around like the mindset, right? You're trying to like amp yourself up to get into work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And also having a schedule that you stick to, right? So just assume in the morning when you take your bed, you're going to work, and just go to that your productive workspace that you have created, and just block out every other thing and start working. When it's time for a break, you go for a break. When it's time to end your day, you end your day, so you don't end up overworking yourself, right? Yeah. So those are some of the things.
Big time. That's awesome. So good. That's great. Well, Anya, we have so many questions. We have a lot of questions in here, and I want us to dive into. So we're going to open up to the audience. So if you have questions, just write them in, and we will answer a few of them. We probably won't answer all of them because there's a lot, and it looks like Roshan's doing awesome work responding to them, and Nexford University is responding to them, but there's a couple in here. I just wanted to say to anyone who's asking about the recording of this, yes, if you've signed up, you will get a link of the recording so you can rewatch this. We have a really good question from Edward on networking. So Anya, what are some of the practical ways I can use to build my network? What ideas do you have here?
Okay. I would say one of them is like what you're doing right now, Edward, by joining these webinars. So you get to have a lot of information and be exposed to some people. Like for me, I got to know Caleb, right, because of Nexford, right? So that's how the chain works. Now you've gotten to know Caleb as well. You can check him out on LinkedIn, see the great work he's doing, follow him. Even when the invite for this thing went out, I received a lot of LinkedIn requests, which I've accepted, at least I think prior to this. So that's how you build your network. So you can also search out for those that are in the field where you are interested in, or those doing similar work as you, and reach out to them, either on LinkedIn or other social media handles that you can find them. Then also attend events, not just virtual events, physical ones as well, when you have the opportunity to. So there you can meet speakers that will speak on various subjects. After the event, you can just walk up to them, introduce yourself, and then get to know them. Some of them can, agree to give you their details and all, and you connect. So it's something that happens over time. It's gradual, but you have to be intentional about it. So those are some of the ways you can build your network. And of course, another important one is your colleagues, right? Don't underestimate anybody. I spoke about the recommendations I got for jobs. These are my colleagues, people that I worked with in the various organizations. So when they move on to another organization and the role opens up there, and they know that this is something Onye can easily do, they just speak with their manager and they speak to HR and they send me an invite. So this is how you build your network. It's gradual, but you have to be intentional, and over time, you have a great network.
That's awesome. Did you talk much about outbound as well, Anya? Like just going and, introducing yourself to people online? I find that I get a lot of very interesting people who will send me messages on LinkedIn being like, hey, I'm doing this thing. I'm really interested in this. This is how I think I can support what you're doing. And I take a lot of those meetings, especially if they're interesting people. And there's a few people now who work with me who got to know me that way. Have you ever done that before? And have you used sort of outbound messaging?
Okay, no, something I did similar to that is what I discussed earlier as volunteering, right?
Yeah.
So what that helps you do is it gives you an opportunity to contribute to something, right? But now that you mentioned it, is that another interesting thing that I noticed recently, I think is on LinkedIn, where you can go to the profile of an organization, maybe they and just click I'm interested, right? Like I'm interested in working with you. So I think it's a new feature that LinkedIn released that you can also leverage, right? So with that, it will help them to go over your profile and maybe send you an interview invite. Yeah. So these are some of the things you can also do. Yeah.
That's awesome. Nice. We have a question here from Ivan, which is many remote jobs have restrictions on country of applicant and aren't inclusive. How can we navigate this? I think it's a really good question. And I'm curious, Anya, about maybe some of the roles you've seen that are not open to every country, and then some of the roles that are open, and how do you find more of those roles that are open to every country?
Okay. Like me, I use LinkedIn very well, right? So some of my my job searches and all is on LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn, you can decide to search these remote jobs based on location, right? So you're not just getting the role, it will also show you the location where these roles or people from these locations can apply from. Something else that you could do is to look out for some organizations. For example, Microsoft, if you go to careers.microsoft.com right now, you can search for roles and also search for the location where the role is. So this helps to guide you on where these roles exist and if your country or your location is eligible to apply. So to take work from your parts to go out there and use some of these tools and filter based on what you're looking for, right? Before you go ahead, like the role I'm currently working in right in Microsoft. When it came out, the location was there. That is Lagos, Nigeria. There's one that I actually posted a couple of weeks ago, but that one was in Prague. So some of these jobs, they always specify the location or the region that they're looking for the candidate for. So you don't just apply to anything that you see. Some of them also say your location doesn't matter, but you have to be willing to like relocate, right, to where they want you to be in. There are some jobs that comes with those options. Because I know a former colleague of mine, that's how he landed his Amazon job in UK from Lagos here. They moved him to UK after he was successful during the interview. So you have to be strategic about this and go ahead to put in the work to search for these roles.
Totally. That's awesome. Really, really good practical advice as usual. We might answer a few more questions. I just wanted to say there's a couple questions here which are people saying, hey, like I wanna, I just finished this course. How do I progress? Or I'm a UX UI intern. How can I like I think sorry, there's a lot of questions here which are people personally asking for advice. We probably won't answer those because I think that we've laid out on how he did it, and he's actually shown you how you can start working towards that direction too. So I'm going to pick out a few different questions that are quite interesting here. One of them is an anonymous attendee asks, what happens if the manager is not your buddy? Have you ever been in a situation where you're maybe not as close with your manager, or maybe you don't get along with them, or things aren't working out, and how would you navigate something like that?
That's quite interesting. Okay, yeah, it's possible because I recall I had a manager who thinks that the work I'm doing is for his own promotion, right? So sometimes when we're in a session, we're discussing something with challenges, or maybe I didn't meet up with a deadline, then he will ask, don't you want me to be promoted, right? So in my mind, I'm asking myself, do you mean that the work I'm doing here is for your own promotion? What about me, right? So there could be managers like that could be selfish, but then remember that this is personal, right? You're fighting for yourself. So when you have such managers, I think what you need to do, first of all, is to always put pressure on them to do what they need to do as your manager. Get them to give you the feedback they're supposed to give you, get them to help you with the blockers that you are facing. If you also have the opportunity to speak to your skip, right? That's your manager's manager. Always leverage that opportunity, right? To share what your challenges are. So, because I recall in that same organization, even though I was having those challenges, I also had the opportunity of speaking to maybe senior managers or people from various other units that I was working with. And sometimes, first of all, you need to really know what you're doing, right? You need to be good at what you're doing. You need to be making impact, because sometimes your work can actually speak for you. Because I recall then, even though my manager wasn't doing anything, some people recognized it. And I remember one of the HR managers actually sent a mail to my manager and my manager's manager about me, about my promotion, asking them to like commence a process for the review, right? So mount pressure on your manager to do what he's supposed to do. Don't insult or try to have a fight. It's a professional environment, so you have to do it in a professional way, right? Always have your meetings and schedule your meetings with them. Always share your challenges, your intents with them. Seek out for opportunities to speak to other managers, right? Maybe some of them can speak to him or get him to change the way he's behaving and all. And always make sure you are making an impact in the work that you are doing, because that is another window for you to still achieve your goal without going through your manager. So that's what I would advise. This is the one I could think of right now.
It sounds like staying focused, having accountability with your manager's manager, and just communicating your work in general is a really good way to sort of get. Yeah. Hopefully that helps the anonymous attendee. Cool. Let's do one more quick one. What are some, let me just find it. Yeah, what job platforms would you recommend outside of LinkedIn when looking for work?
Okay. I've really not used anyone outside of LinkedIn, but I know there are a couple out there that are quite popular. I know there's a Glassdoor, right? and some other platforms that show remote work, only remote work. That's what they show, right? But I've not really used them. So my focus has been mostly on LinkedIn, because I don't really know how some of those other platform works, whether the roles there, because I've heard or seen something online where some roles are not real. You know, people just put it up there to drive traffic and all. So I'd rather not waste my time, going through all those process. So I've mostly been using LinkedIn, but of course, you can research and see what the reviews of all these other job platforms are, and try them out.
Awesome. So good. I think that's a wrap. I think that's where we'll leave it off. We're almost at time. But I'd love to just quickly, recap what we talked about, just so we can summarize some of those learnings, because there's a lot of great stuff in there. So I guess Anye has been working in tinkering with and learning about data and data analytics for a long time. Landed a job at Microsoft and is working remotely in Lagos with a team based in Seattle. Now, the process to getting that seems like it's taken a lot of learning, a lot of work, quite a few roles, and building up to that Microsoft role. It took a bit of courage and it took a couple of tries, and then eventually you applied and you landed the job, which is awesome. And I think when you broke down how you did it, it started with, or how you would do it again, right? Land a role like this again. You would really think about what sort of role works for you in tech and what role do you want to have in tech. How do you learn those skills and acquire those skills? And it seems like Nexford was pretty instrumental in that. How do you then go and build a portfolio? And then how do you meet people? How do you start applying for roles? How do you build up your profile? And it seems like that's the playbook for sort of landing these jobs, which is really cool. Great to know that. Then we talked about remote work and how it can be great for productivity, great for saving time, great for focus, but maybe not so great in some other aspects, you need discipline and you need a schedule, and you need there's basically a bunch of things you need to do to be great at and thrive in remote work, like communication as well. We went into questions and sort of dived into other questions that you as an audience had, and hopefully answered those well. So that's my recap. But Anya, anything else you'd add to that, or any parting words for the audience on remote work and landing this tech role?
Okay, I would say it's quite beneficial, right? And going about learning your skills and networking is quite important. One of the things I would also say is I'm sure that most of the people that attended these are people looking forward to maybe joining into tech or making progress in tech. And we spoke about networking. So one of the ways you can actually do that is to maybe share your LinkedIn profiles here. We could follow each other. We could actually take this conversation outside of this webinar, right, to discuss more. You can always reach out to me. I'll provide guidance as best as I could, right? So yeah, that's one of the things I'm going to add, because we can't really exhaust all the things and benefits that come with remote work or ways to go about joining into tech career on just this webinar. So there's a lot more, right, that could be considered. Yeah.
Awesome. So good. Let's round out there. So just to conclude, if you enjoyed this, there's another session with Nexford coming up. I'm going to put it in the comments here, and you can register for that session. That session's about whether an MBA or an MSDT. MSDT means a Master of Science in Digital Technology. Which of these programs could be a fit for you? So it's a bit more about the learning side of things and the education side. So if you're interested in that, check out the link I just sent, and you can RSVP there for the next session. I also write a newsletter called Tech Safari, where I talk about tech in Africa. I think it's a great resource for anyone who wants to stay in the loop or stay up to date with what's happening. There's a lot of exciting things happening in tech in Africa. So I'm going to send a link to that here as well in the chat. And of course, Nexford has put on this great event, and Onye is Nexford alumni. I'm a Nexford fanboy, I guess is the word. And I'm going to send a link to Nexford now also in the chat. Let me just pull that up. There we go. Cool. Guys, thank you so much for attending. I hope you learned something new. Thank you so much, Onye. This was such an insightful session. So much advice there. I hope we can do it again soon. And thanks everyone for coming along.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Caleb. Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Nexford.
Awesome.